Welcome to the Exodus Companies podcast. My name is Jared. I am the CEO and founder of the Exodus Companies. This is a movement from culture to build community. Headline hunting is a play on words, and it's a format that we bring out onto the show every once in a while to connect you guys with articles that are real, sadly, often. They're sadly real, and they exist in the world around us in media, and we dissect them. We start talking about what are they, what do they mean, and we try to find the little bits of truth that might be inside of them, or we completely dismantle the lies that are being portrayed through these different articles. And the fun part about this entire format is the fact that I have no idea what I'm walking into. And that is a legitimate fear of mine every time that we do this, but I digress. So Brenton today is on the podcast as well. You guys have seen him from time to time. And Brenton is going to essentially read me an article. I will give you my take on said article, and maybe I have a good take, maybe I don't have much to say, just kind of depends on the topic that is at hand. And what I hope to help you guys with throughout this particular format is that we start to learn how to critically analyze the media in general and the articles that they are putting out in front of us, because there is almost always a manipulative spin. It doesn't matter which way it's spinning, but there is usually some sort of spin on these articles. Before we get into that, guys, a couple ways you can show support. Please, the only thing I'm going to ask for this episode is just pay it forward. If you found value in this particular episode, tell somebody about it. If you hated the episode, you don't have to talk about it. That's fine. If we didn't do a good job, awesome. You don't have to pay it forward because we didn't earn that. But if you feel like this podcast and our mission earns a share from you, that's all I'm going to ask from you guys today, and I would appreciate that. So without further ado, Brenton, I guess kick away the first episode or the first article.
Yeah. So before I even go into that, so I logged on to all these like mainstream outlets.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, there's got to be some good articles. The first 10 articles, I think it was on MSNBC, is all about Trump. That's all it is this week.
Go figure.
And so like that makes me figure like what else, like it makes me think what else is happening.
Yeah.
Like behind the scenes. Anyway, so that was just the big thing this week, which I don't even think it's really worth going into.
Well, even with now, I'll touch on it for a second. I mean,
even if you want to.
Even without me knowing, obviously, what you pulled out, I knew right away that if you looked on the news right now, Trump would be like center frame attention. And, it's kind of confusing to me a little bit, too, because Trump actually did post on Truth Social that he said, on Tuesday, I'm going to get arrested. Yeah. And so there's this piece of me that's like, okay, he's just, maybe this is real. Maybe he's actually getting arrested, but he's also, whatever that was, what do you call it on Truth Social? You can't call it a tweet. You can't call it a post. Like, what is that?
Yeah, I don't even know, to be honest.
I think it's just truther, post-truth. What do you call it?
All I know is a retruth. That's like if you like repost.
Okay, whatever.
I don't know what the actual post is, but
I don't understand the lingo of Truth Social. Whatever he did, he made a post on Truth Social where he's like, hey, I'm going to get arrested on Tuesday. It kind of made me feel like I'm watching a guy who like desires to be extremely relevant, but isn't. So like kind of craving that attention, but also maybe putting a little bit too much importance on himself. I don't know what to think of the entire situation really. And I'm just analyzing what I thought that post sounded like. I don't know what the actual end goal of that was. Like it said to rally and
I think there was some sort of rally. I don't even know much about what happened or what went down, but
I know that the media wants to make Trump the boogeyman in as many different things as possible. And sometimes he earns that. Like, just being real. Sometimes he earns that critique. Humans are flawed. Yeah. I'm okay with being like, hey, I agree with somebody on this. And holy cow, I completely disagree with him on another topic. One of those topics I completely disagreed with throughout the entire presidency of Trump was him starting the snowball of that whole vaccine.
Yeah,
I forget what that was called, what operation that was called or whatever. But they tried to rush the vaccines out. Well, people forget that it was under Trump's presidency that was initiated. That entire operation was pushed through at the very beginning under him. And there were other things like the whole bump fire stock thing. I don't agree with the government getting involved in things like bump fire stocks. So I'm okay. I'm an adult. I believe that I can sometimes say I totally disagree with this guy on this. And yet I agree on certain things over here. But what the media wants to do in general is distract you from something. And people will say, oh, you're putting on your conspiracy hat right there. And maybe that's so, but I can tell you historically, if something is going down that warrants our attention because we should be seeking accountability, one of the first things that they will do is this dog and pony show of media where they will just hype up the same story over and over and over again. And they will dig up a story that triggers us, that makes us mad, and it further divides people because at the end of the day, if you can focus media on President Trump, what will happen is you've got whatever they say, 50% of people over here that hate him and 50% of people over here that are okay with him. And now the more that you talk about that, you create this turbulence that is going to fracture more and more people. And I do believe fully that that is their intention. I think that there are some people that get caught into it that their intention isn't necessarily to divide, and they probably believe the things that they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a lot of manipulation that happens. And then people will follow along with their party line to further push that divide around. So I don't have much more to say. I don't know if he's actually going to get arrested.
Yeah, I don't even know the full details of that.
The one thing I'll say is, like, at surface level, you and I were talking about this yesterday, putting aside any legalities or because he was campaigning for presidency, I don't know. I don't know how that affects the outcome of this, but what I can tell you is what it sounds like to me, my interpretation is something went down with some lady who's a star and other
Stormy,
things.
yeah.
Stormy or whatever. I don't even know who that is. Anyway, something went down with them. She's do you even know? Like, isn't
What?
she like
what she does?
No, I know what she does, but
okay.
isn't she like essentially it sounds like Trump paid her to make a story go away.
Yeah.
Which happens a lot. People are like, "Oh, that's a nefarious thing to happen," but the reality is, let's say you get sued by somebody and you can reach a settlement outside of court. That is oftentimes more ideal than settling it in court because court is extremely expensive. So if your two attorneys, attorney for this person over here that claims Trump did this thing and Trump's attorneys that claim that he's innocent come together and say, hey, here's a way that we can resolve this and make this issue disappear completely. I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars. You sign this thing and go be quiet forever. People do that all the time because you're actually agreeing upon a standard together to avoid the lengthy court case, dragging everybody through the mud, all the witnesses, all that stuff. So again, I don't know enough about the situation to say exactly what I think about it, but I do not think that it warrants the amount of attention that our media is giving.
100%. Yeah.
That's where I'm at personally.
Well, it's been a dead horse for a while.
Yeah.
It's been going in circles.
Yeah.
So anyways, this first article, woman, 29, enrolled in New Jersey high school as she missed teenage days. So this is something that I've been seeing. I'll explain a little bit.
Yeah, explain that a little bit. I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, so a 29-year-old woman who allegedly used fake documents to enroll in a New Jersey high school meant no harm and was only trying to recreate her happy teenage days, a court heard. So the reason that I picked this one out.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, but this is something that I've been seeing for the past, I don't know, year, 2 years, is the people my age or even a little bit older, they want to go back to their old high school days.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to grow up or they don't want to, whatever their reason is. And her reason is actually, so the woman's lawyer, however, said she was only trying to return to a place of safety and welcoming and an environment that she looks back on fondly.
So right away, the first thing I think of is she wasn't equipped to be an adult, if that makes sense. So I think in general, there's a couple things that are happening here. We all have those friends that no matter how old we get, how far into life we get, no matter where we are, career-wise, family-wise, it doesn't matter. The only thing that they do when you get together is talk about the good old days. And it might be that they played on a sports team and made a pretty cool goal or touchdown or whatever they did. They did this thing, and in their mind, they're like, I did a thing. And it's like the scenes in movies where there's always these old dudes at a bar, and they're like hanging out, and they're just reliving this thing that happened when they were 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, something like that. And the reality is it's kind of pitiful, you know, when you think about it. It's not always just that one person's fault it's somewhat, I think, how we're equipped as children to enter into the world. It is still their fault, and they have a choice to make that they can be productive now.
Yeah.
And I think that society in general doesn't do a good job of equipping people to be productive going forward because we have a false sense of what it means to be successful. I mean, you're younger than me. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah. 100%.
I mean, what do you think you were equipped with? Did somebody tell you? I mean, you're a little bit different, I would say.
Yeah.
Maybe your dad did do that, but
yeah. I definitely was equipped in other ways. But I think just getting out of high school, I was like, oh, wow, okay, I have to step it up a little bit. You know,
Yeah.
like there's stuff I got to learn and I'm still learning. But yeah, I would just say as that age group is kind of struggling. And there's a lot of articles. I was just looking it up today before we started the podcast about how the big gap in like responsibility with the 20 to 30-year-olds, how they all kind of want to go back.
Yeah, and I think this is where older generations will typically look back and be like, oh, well, they're so soft. They're so weak. They're so this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everybody likes to say, this generation coming up sucks and they don't know how to do anything or whatever. Somebody raised them. And that's always the reality is every generation as it gets older looks back at the younger generation and says, wow, these young whippersnappers suck and they don't know how to work hard and they don't know how to save money and they don't know, you know, whatever complaint people like to make. But kind of unpacking that, it just speaks to me about the lack of general purpose in our culture. People do not understand that being the innocence of children, you know, being a child with no responsibilities is cool in that moment. I mean, that we all go through that phase because we go from babies, we're raised. Ultimately, then, though, nature itself, every other animal, creature, including people, at some point you need to leave the nest. You know what I mean? You have to leave the safety and the safety net of your parents and those teenage years and those childhood years, and then ultimately write a path and a journey that equates to something. And in general, think about the people around you in your whole life. How many of them have a distinct purpose in their life? Because I promise you this, if you find people that have that distinct purpose, they will not tell you, I wish I could go back to high school. They just won't. Like when I think about my friends when I'm around them, and I'm not usually around this particular friend group that I'm thinking of, but they're saying, I wish I could go back to high school. I wish I could go back to those days when I had less responsibility and all this stuff. And I'm like, you guys are freaking crazy. What's wrong with you? Why would you want to go back to a time where everything was dictated, where everything was provided, where everything felt safe, where everything was given to you and you didn't have a say in what went down? And as you're hearing me describe that, think of the chaos in culture. And now you start to understand why some people actually crave that, because what we have manufactured inside of our culture is a chaotic environment that is purposely meant to hold us into a certain spot, you know? So I feel bad for someone like that.
Yeah.
When I hear that, I'm like, man, nobody taught her that there's an opportunity to build purpose in her life right now.
Yeah.
That she's 29 years old. She very well could be almost halfway through life. And the only thing that she can think of is the first 25% of life and trying to stay in that. And then ultimately the people around her, someone's enabling that. So if you want to pretend to be a kid and you want to go to high school, there's an enabler somewhere. What happens when that enabler's gone? Like you will face life.
Yeah.
She will face life the real way, the hard way at some point. You can't manufacture a bubble that protects you from it. So that's an interesting article.
Yeah. Yeah, that made me think of, I think it was a few years back, McDonald's like created like an adult Happy Meal. And I thought that was the funniest thing, like for adults.
You know, real quick, going back to that, I think that it's also, I feel like someone's going to be like, holy cow, Jared doesn't want to think about any good memories or anything. So like, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that it's bad for you to be like, hey, I had a good time in high school, or I remember, you just let me share a story. Like I remember pulling our trucks around campfires with like 20 of us, being in the middle of nowhere and just having a bonfire and hanging out. And those are some fond memories. And I love those memories. I think it's awesome. As we started driving and getting our licenses, we had a taste of responsibility, but we weren't bearing the full weight of living on our own. And I think that that was an awesome period of time. And I think that that's a vital period of time as well, but people do it wrong and they navigate that improperly. And if you think about it, have you ever walked up a staircase that never made another step up? You know what I mean? Like you might have gone 3 steps, but then stopped.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not supposed to, but you're like, wait, there's a staircase here. It went 3 feet, but I got to go 10 more feet.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no, you're not ever going to find a staircase that's half done.
Yeah.
But our life should be sort of like building blocks. It should be positioning us forward. We should be desiring to learn and be better. We should be desiring to connect with people that are ahead of us, not behind us. Like, why at 29 would you want to hang out with like 13-year-olds or 14-year-olds? Unless you're of a different make and model, in which case we have a different podcast we can talk about. However, aside from the creepy aspect of that, because it doesn't sound like this is necessarily like a creepy thing.
That wasn't that.
But it just sounds to me like there's a person whose purpose is broken and they haven't been taught even how to grasp that purpose. But hey, maybe they have been. And maybe they've just taken the lazy, easy route and said, that's not for me, the hard life thing. I'm just going to go hang out with these teenagers because apparently that is
more
the
fun,
thing.
right?
Yeah, it's more fun. Interesting. Yeah, that's a fascinating topic.
Yeah. So this next article is kind of related to that, but title is, with a 4-day work week, you'd get about 8,000 hours. That's 346 days back. And that's based off of a 44-year-old. The reason that's the title is because, as you know, in the UK, and some, I shouldn't say all of you, Europe, not UK. I was like, wait.
So Europe is a lot bigger.
So in parts of Europe, there's 4-day work weeks as the standard. And the first line in this is, if you worked a day less each week and got paid the same amount, what would you do with your free time? And I think that's an interesting topic, because right now, through some of the, like California tried this, I believe, 2 years ago, to kind of make that the standard.
Yeah.
So essentially, as a business owner, this is where I want your opinion.
Yeah.
You're paying your employees for 5 days a week, but they're only working 4.
Yeah. It's an interesting topic. And Ethan and I have talked about this a lot because we have friends in the surrounding industries that's how they operate their business.
I should clarify, 8 hours a day.
8 hours.
It's not a 40-hour.
Oh, it's
week.
not like a 10-hour.
It's like a part-time job. I should have explained that.
But they base the salary on,
you get paid the same
40 hours.
Yeah.
So to me, right away, I'll look at it from an employee standpoint or an entrepreneur and say, what would I view of that particular situation?
Mm-hmm.
I'd want to work the 5th day and make more money.
Yeah.
Like that right away is right where my brain goes, is like, all right, cool. All my coworkers are working 4 days. I'm going to walk right to the CEO or the supervisor or the VP or whoever I've got to talk to. Be like, what can I make if I work the 5th day? Right away. Done. I want to know, how much can I make more by being here that 5th day? Because it just opens up an opportunity to me.
Yeah.
Like,
100%.
So any of you guys that are employees, like, especially if you're at a firm or a company that you want to progress, you should be looking at those positions where you could position yourself into. And that's often what is missed as people are working through their employment journey. And what I mean by that is paying attention to the skills you can develop and then continue to do jobs better than the people that are ahead of you, and continuing to put in your time and all of your energy. And eventually you get recognized for that. Eventually somebody's going to be like, hey, that's the one. And they will end up progressing. What I would find very hard to believe is that the executive team would follow that.
Yeah.
I can see the argument for doing a 4-day work week, especially if it's in a production or like a really laborious environment and they're putting in 10-hour days. I have quite a few friends that have businesses that do that kind of structure, but I've never heard of anybody saying, hey, I'm going to pay you this much. And it also seems kind of shady because it's like, you're not actually paying them for 40 hours, though. You're paying them for 32. For 32. Yeah. But at the same time, what would a comparable business be doing? Because let's say you make $50,000 doing that 4-day week. what's the next comparable company that's working 5 days paying their people? Because they might be paying those people 65, in which case the people feel like they're making a 40-hour week salary, but this business is just paying them what they feel they owe them for 35 or 32 or whatever it is.
Yeah. And it's also kind of sad to see where people say they would spend their time, because this was an article they did basically statistics on how people are spending their time with that extra day.
Yeah.
So it says here, universally, we would all get a little bit more streaming service and chill time. If a 21-year-old spent their extra day off like a weekend, they'd get almost 3,000 hours more of TV time over their working life. And so like they're basically encouraging just do nothing.
So this particular article, you said it was tried in California, or is this just
no? So it is being brought to the state, not being brought to the states. It's being brought to the court system.
Oh,
not the court system, the House. Sorry, I am.
So they're trying to.
I am all over the place.
It's okay. We won't blame Brenton on that. So this is tried in Europe.
Yes,
and we're considering trying that over here. Did the article speak anything about them trying to pass legislation? Is that what?
Yeah. So earlier this month, Takano, which is one of the people, he's a representative from California, reintroduced
Of course he is.
Yeah, reintroduced legislation to reduce work weeks to 32 hours, but a new national standard faces slim odds in the Republican-controlled House. Opponents argue that the one-size-fits-all approach would worsen existing staff shortages and mean greater overtime pay and logistical burdens for companies. A similar bill failed to pass in California last year.
Look, at the end of the day, people can work 4 days a week if they want to. That.
They already have that.
You already
choice.
have that ability.
Yeah.
Now, you might be trying to do that at a company that doesn't need that, in which case you're just not going to get the job. Ultimately, I think that it's a cop-out. I think that when they're using TV as the justification for the extra free time, it's like, dude, if these people get 3,000 hours a year, I didn't do the math, I don't know. If they had that much extra time and they applied it into something that makes them better, can you imagine how much better we would be?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like, it's one of those things where people completely miss these opportunities. And instead they're saying, oh, I feel bad. I don't want to work 40 hours a week, 5 days a week. And that makes me feel bad and I don't like it. So here, let's just blanketly say 4 days only. In which case companies like mine will not be adhering to that.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
It's like, it's the most ridiculous thing ever. Now, building a flexible schedule inside of your company, I'm 100% for. If somebody can figure out how to build a company, run it effectively, and they have either flexible hours with employees or varying hours with employees or 4-day work weeks if they're 410s, or they have rotating 4-day work weeks. There's 1,000 different ways people have done business. And I'm 100% for business owners doing what they think is best and their team building a structure of what they think is best. What I'm not about is the government coming in and saying, oh, you have to do this 4-day work week. You can't work the 5th day, because they're going to use it exactly like they just said in the article as an opportunity to just pump you full of propaganda.
Yeah.
Like that's it. If you're watching TV, you're just going to be watching more propaganda. And I'm not against
and
TV,
they listed a whole bunch of, like, in that, basically that analysis that they did, they listed a whole bunch of different hours that you could add on to stuff. And they're all pretty selfish in my opinion. They're all just like self-centered. And the funny thing is that caring for others, you'd actually spend 2 less hours a year.
Really?
According to the analysis.
Okay.
If you get another work or another weekend day.
This is why we talk about a lot the 7Fs, what I have on my hoodie here, the personal excellence journey that we are trying to continue to grow in all of these areas, because when you are intentional about the time that you have, even working a full-time job, 8 hours a day, you have time to invest in yourself. You have time to experience the joys of life, and you get to fulfill a purpose. You get to have a real purpose in your life. And I do believe that it's a cop-out when people are trying to find ways around that. It's not an existence to just exist. We are called to a purpose, and anyone listening to this podcast believes that, or I don't think that you would be listening to this podcast. But yeah, the likelihood of that, in my opinion, ever passing, I think is nothing because businesses have the right to schedule as they see fit. I mean, on the flip side, I think that business owners also have to be ethical. We have to obviously care about your team. And there are business owners out there that honestly have no business doing business. They don't care about their team. They take advantage of people. They have horrible ethics and values, and they should see their business crumble because they're not operating it in a way that is ethical. Now, some of them exist, but at the same time, right now, what I would say is if people would just focus on investing in hard skills and being able to demand raises or promotions, and I don't mean going to your boss's door and like burning it down and being like, I demand you pay me more. No, what I mean is your skill set speaks so highly of who you are, and what you bring to the table is this big word I'm about to use, undeniable. You are undeniably the best at the job that you are performing. I have never put forth effort in a job and not progressed when I have tried to be undeniably good. There has never been a case. And I mean, maybe I worked at a small campground once.
Oh.
And that, maybe that's the one situation. I'm like sitting here like, oh, was it that? Okay. I digress. But as a professional, as I've been in my professional career, every time that I have put forth effort, I've been given more responsibility. When you get more responsibility, your pay goes up, or benefits go up, or flexibility goes up. And if you're working for a company that's really driven and also driven by values, you will find that the owners are extremely flexible. There's obviously left and right boundaries of what can be allowed to happen, but anyone in my circle is flexible. Yeah. Where if somebody comes to the table and says, I have this really great idea, and here's how this is going to make the company more revenue, but also give a lot more flexibility to the team, nobody I know is going to be like, oh, get out of here. You're stupid. Stop being this way. Now, they might have reasons why they would say no. And it might be information that you as an employee who's listening may honestly not have a grasp on. You just might not have a piece of that reasoning. But yeah, I don't know. Generally speaking, we kicked the Europeans out of the United States back in the 1700s, and I'm okay if they just don't come back. We don't have to listen to them.
All right. So let's talk TikTok for a second. You know how I feel about TikTok.
You know how I feel about TikTok too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, we're both on the same page.
Yeah, pretty much.
But this is happening again. Trump tried this, I think, in, I forget what year, 2017, 2018, tried to ban it. Apparently it's happening again because platform stars defend app in DC as CEO set to testify at Congress. So with that, I want your opinion on that because that's the government banning an app, which I hate, but at the same time, they're banning something.
It's a really tricky topic to navigate.
Yeah.
And I find myself kind of struggling a little bit to even pin down exactly what I think.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to preface my answer with, I'm going to be continuing to learn more so I can position myself in a better way to answer this at another time in a more in-depth way. I'm still going to answer it.
Yeah.
I struggle anytime the government comes in and says, we're banning this thing. Typically speaking, if the government is coming in and saying we are going to ban a thing, I get extremely skeptical. What's their reasoning? Why would they be motivated to ban something? I know that what they're saying is it has Chinese ownership and that it's actually spy software on all of our phones that can track us. It can hack into things. It can be used to essentially cripple the United States. I get very skeptical when our officials start saying that because every single action that they do dismantles our safety, weakens our economy, destroys our dollar, and makes all of us more miserable. Everything that these political elitists do dismantles our republic. So right away, I call BS when they are saying our reasoning is your safety. That's what they're saying. Whenever the government says it's for your safety, call BS right away. Be like, all right, that's not the case. What's the real reason? What is the real reason for why you are banning this thing? Because it is not my safety. It's never my safety. It's usually more regulation. Normally, if they want to go ban something or even allow something to exist that they don't like, they are going to create a way to make the government money which ends up going to politicians. And then they money launder at places like Ukraine, and they pay all of these big defense corporations who then give kickbacks back to political elitists, and they just get to line their pockets. And it's how you have people that come into office who have virtually no skills. They have no background. They have no list of things that they've accomplished. Like, you don't look at these people and say those are the best and brightest. More often than not, they're kind of stupid, and they don't have any achievements that you would look at and be like, those people are amazing. They definitely deserve that. But then they come into office and all of a sudden, in 20 years, they're worth 200, 300, 400 million. You're like, well, how does somebody like this do that? Well, what I just described is what they do. They pillage you and me. They print money and they get kickbacks for it. And it's treasonous against the United States. So is TikTok spyware? I would flip the question and say, is Instagram spyware?
I think they are all in the same boat at the end of the day. Yes, it is a Chinese company, and I'm sure there's other nefarious things going on.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they're all kind of the same.
Yeah. I look at all the products that we have that say made in China too. How many software programs exist on our phones and laptops and computers and everything else that's Chinese made that could have some kind of embedded software or firmware or something that is specifically designed to give them an advantage over us as a nation.
Yeah.
Like, obviously.
Yeah, and it's proven that Meta as a whole has that spyware capability.
Yeah, I think that probably one of the main driving forces when I think about it is the fact that the stateside companies like Meta are more in bed already with the government. They're more easily controlled by our government. And so our government has access immediately to the files that are being harvested. And I think that they see that as a huge advantage. We also know that TikTok had been blowing up over the last year. There's billions of users now on it. Yeah. And I had seen a report, this was months ago, so I can't quote the data, but TikTok was outpacing Instagram as far as growth and new users and user interaction, whereas Instagram and Meta was sliding backwards. And so naturally, let's just play a hypothetical. Government entities and political pawns are in bed with Meta. I'm just hypothetically saying this. Hypothetically. If they were, who would you want to be the monopoly? The person that you control or the person that potentially controls you? And we all have seen from the Hunter Biden laptops and all the other stories that have come out how much influence in our politics the Chinese government actually has and how much influence over certain individuals these different governments have. So I wonder if on one hand, you've got essentially an app that is being made the boogeyman, but it's to protect the current spyware that we're being spied with.
That we think is okay.
That everybody's like, oh, it's a U.S. company, so it's good to go. There's a lot of bad things that come from all of the data harvesting and the selling of your information. There's a lot of AI apps that everybody uses to put filters on and do all this other kind of stuff that their terms and conditions, and we've talked about this before, are very, very sketchy. But we use them because, hey, it's a U.S.-based company, so it's got to be good, right? So naturally, I think that the whole TikTok witch hunt, the whole Trump witch hunt is just that. It's a witch hunt. It is a distraction from the fact that they are currently pillaging our economy. We did a podcast on silver, and I think about the fact that since just 2015, our dollar's lost 27% of its value. Since 2015, you've lost 27% of your ability to have buying power. So what are we doing about that? And why is that happening? Well, we've been putting out content a lot on the precious metals and talking a lot about the economy and what we can do to kind of hedge against that. To me, that's a bigger topic. Or the fact that we are sending billions of dollars over to Ukraine. Nobody wants to just say in our political realm, hey, we shouldn't be doing that. But we are. And I saw this other article, and I don't know how to audit this because I don't have access to the balance sheets of the federal government. But apparently, we've spent more on the Ukraine war at this point than we did on the Afghanistan war.
Yeah, I believe I heard the same thing.
And it's like, what?
Disgusting.
So you're telling me we spent 20 years over in the Middle East, and this war has been going on for, what, a year and a half in Ukraine? Probably ballpark that. And we've spent more. And we don't even have our troops there, supposedly, theoretically.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. think
I mean, that's another thing we could debate. But and then they're worried about TikTok, and they're worried about Trump paying off some adult actress because of a story he didn't want coming out, and they'll distract you by all of these things, because if they do a shiny little object over here, they know that you're not going to focus on it. So what I'm hoping that you learn through these articles is that you don't take the bait for that first article. When you see the article and you feel your blood pressure rise, you're like, yeah, get rid of TikTok. Take a second and breathe. Let's just take a step back and let's try to think logically. How could they use this to manipulate us? How could they use this to control us? And I don't have the perfect answer for the TikTok article.
Yeah, and that's where I was at, because when I first saw it, I was like, yeah, like, let's ban it. And I was like, oh, okay, well, let's think about this, because my experience with TikTok has been fully negative. I mean, the first time I created an account and logged in, it was just inappropriate stuff on, like, immediately. Yeah. And since then, I was like, I'm done with TikTok. It's just disgusting.
So the one irony is, and this is information that I don't know how we would ever verify, because it's coming from China, and you can't even verify our own information coming from our own government. But supposedly in China, the Chinese children have many limitations on TikTok and many restrictions in place for how long they can be on the app, what content would be shown and promoted.
And they're also getting a totally different feed. They're getting educational.
Supposedly, yeah.
And
again,
we don't know.
We don't know, but think about if you were trying to dismantle a culture, what would you do? Well, you could have all of your teenage boys addicted to TikTok because they can see like 90% naked chicks and sometimes fully naked on their feed. And all they had to do was answer some basic questions, and TikTok knows they're a gentleman between the age of this and this. Think about that. The fact that that app right away says, I can target you and distract you and make you less motivated, give you less drive, do all these negative things to you, just simply knowing that you are a male. And so I see bad things with social media, and I say it often, and you've heard me say it in our meetings and stuff. You know, I've joked with some of our team members like, hey, don't ever open up Reels, don't ever open up TikTok, because you will get sucked into the black hole of death. Yeah. And it's true. You can start swiping and then all of a sudden realize that your 20 minutes has gone by. Yeah. And you're like, whoa, 20 minutes has gone by, and it's designed to be like crack. So I agree, we should do social media less. We should be craving human interaction more. I think those are great things. I think that the government should GTFO and just leave us alone, though, in most cases. Now, if we had a moral and ethical government, okay, we had a real republic that was actually by the people, for the people, and all of us weren't like hoarding ammo and guns waiting for the impending collapse. If we had a very healthy nation, I think that you could have a healthy conversation of a Chinese-owned company that supposedly is proven to have spyware attached to their app that can hack into different systems based on just having access to your phone. I think you could have a legitimate, concerned discussion about whether or not that's a national security threat. Because one of the main functions of the federal government was to protect the homeland. And that was written into the Bill of Rights, and we have articles surrounding that. But the problem is when you have an abusive government that is pillaging us, stealing our money, burning our economy down, how can they say, but the Chinese government's scary? So scary. The Russian government, so scary. How can this government say this with a straight face? And they don't. They say it with their fingers crossed behind their backs. They're talking out of their mouth both ways. They're lying to us. They're cheating. They're stealing. And they don't care because they get rich. So I don't know exactly where I stand on the TikTok thing.
No, and me neither. That's why I wanted to ask you. Last article, credit card companies drop plans to track gun store purchases after pressure from lawmakers. So you probably remember back in September of last year, there was basically all these credit card companies that were going to start tracking firearm purchases. But now they basically stepped back because there's some pressure in the state governments to kind of stop that regulation. Yeah. So I thought that was kind of cool how that's finally happening. So the one thing that Visa said is they shared a statement explaining that legislative efforts to prohibit or restrict the code have led to significant confusion and legal uncertainty in the payments ecosystem, adding that the state actions disrupt the intent of global standards.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm okay with disruption of global standards.
Yeah. I was just saying, because that's one thing that caught me off guard. I was like, oh, so that's a global standard now, just tracking firearm purchases.
So
and it really is.
It is in every other country.
Yeah.
There's a couple things that exist here. And there's one thing that I will say about the whole collapse of the dollar and the fact that they're pillaging our economy. There are agendas out that state that they want a one world currency. That is not a secret. This is not hypothesis. This is actually written down, and people speak about this all the time. Leaders of different nations and countries, they would like to consolidate their currency into one world currency, because if you could do that, and somehow it probably would require the elimination of a bunch of different world leaders, because you see all the fighting with countries.
Yeah.
Like, you couldn't have separate world leaders unless somehow they all agreed upon the same currency, which eventually would probably collapse and create wars, just like everything else. But in our nation, they want us to go to a global digital currency. So think about the fact that if you could already create legislation that got passed that said we can track firearms with your credit card, they'll just apply that to that global currency. Yeah. And now when you don't just answer to the US government, you're answering to whatever fictitious global entity is ruling at the time, whatever monopoly of force that is. They'll just come and take whatever they want, and they'll have a literal record of what you have done. And there's a couple ways you can combat that. You can pay cash certain places, but you still have background checks, you still have paperwork. Like, people are bent out of shape about this one thing when it was going down. And I think that it did cause some alarm. But you should also be pretty pissed off that when you go to buy a gun, there's so much paperwork already in place. There's so many checks already in place. There is a de facto registration in place. For example, FFLs that close, the ATF demands that you send all of your acquisition and disposition books into the ATF. And so naturally, what do you think they're doing with them?
Keeping them.
Yeah. They're supposed to destroy records, but do you think they are? No, they're not.
Definitely not.
They're filing them.
Yeah.
Now, the ATF is forced to use really archaic methods, and thankfully, they're not very well funded. So oftentimes they are at the short end of that stick pretty hard. But that doesn't stop them from doing things like Waco and burning houses and shooting dogs and stuff. So, I think on the surface level, that's probably a win. The fact that there has been enough pressure to say, hey, you can't be tracking gun purchases like that. Because are they tracking anything else like that? There's other things that are killing far more people than guns that are being purchased with credit cards.
Yeah.
So what are they doing to that? And it paints this weird reality of the fact that these global corporations have such a desire to control and manipulate. Like, they just can't just be a business. Like, you can't just do your business well. You've got to get involved in the politics and manipulations of our culture. And that can be very frustrating. But, the less they know, the less that you put on your credit card, the better. Like I said, we could become more financially fit as a nation. And, I use credit cards too. I just think that in general, our society should get used to never carrying balances in credit cards, using cash for more items, and also finding ways to just be more discreet in general. Like, there's always a paper trail.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, even if they're not tracking it, they can still look back and find.
Yeah, there's
stuff.
ways to find things.
Yeah,
there are. So I don't think there's a perfect method unless you trade gold or silver behind closed doors for rifles, which I would never have done that ever. Never, ever. But that's an interesting article. I don't know where that's going to go. I know that over the years, there's been more and more pressure from payment processors and credit cards and all kinds of different companies like that to try to put a stop to anything gun related, because everybody knows that gun equal bad in the minds of all of these people. So, yeah, I guess that's the 4 articles.
Yep, that's it.
So, guys, if you found that helpful at all, I would appreciate if you pay it forward. Thank you for tuning into this particular episode. Hopefully we had some laughs. Hopefully it made you think a little bit. And we're going to put the links to these particular articles in the description of the podcast and also in the description of the YouTube video. We're doing that for authenticity reasons so that you guys can look at the articles that we have posted and ultimately think for yourself. I'm not telling you to get on this podcast and just regurgitate my opinion, and I hope that you don't do that. What I hope that happens is you listen to what I say, and hopefully I present it in a clear way that enables you to start dissecting and thinking critically for yourself, because that's a skill that we are lacking in our nation, and we need to get back to a place where we are overly critical of the media and we start to dismantle their lies so that we can focus forward on our future. And I still believe to this day that the best way that we can pave a new path for our nation is to be focusing on the 7 F's that you see on my hoodie here. And if we hone in on those different skills and those different traits and areas, we will ultimately become better for ourselves, better for our families, and better for our communities. Thank you for listening to the Exodus Companies podcast. Our mission is to create a new revival of culture through our podcast, media, and hard goods that we manufacture. We are far more than just a podcast of thoughts. We are creators of tangible goods made here in the United States. If you found value in the podcast episode, we simply ask that you pay it forward. You can do this in several different ways. You can subscribe to our podcast and leave our podcast a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our various YouTube channels. Be sure to follow us on Instagram as well. Our Instagram page is typically private, but we will be making it public for the month of March. That is a great opportunity for friends and families to check out what we are about and to see the message of cultural revival. After March, we will return the page to private to maintain the core group of the Exodus. The last way we will ask for support is by purchasing our products through our various businesses. We know that we are in economic hard times, so it is more important than ever to be putting your money wisely into businesses that are pouring back into the culture. Audit who you support and only support those who will fight for our nation, our rights, our people, and our culture. If you feel like we have done our part and you are blessed with excess, consider supporting us at our brands TA Targets, Arcane Co., Lantern, and of course, here at the Exodus Companies. We have a special code that will work to save you 15% off of most of our products, now available for a very limited time. Use code EXODUS15 at checkout on our sites to save on select products. That code again is EXODUS15 at checkout. We thank you for sharing this podcast and paying it forward. We thank you for doing the legwork and the hard work inside of culture and your community, and we are honored for you to be a part of this cultural exodus.